Hey everyone, we'll get started here in just a minute. If you don't mind, why don't you post where you're joining us from? We'd love to know where you're at and give you guys a shout out. If you have any questions that you want to get in line here, feel free to drop them in chat and we'll jump into answering questions in just a minute. Otherwise, thanks for being here. All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. A couple housekeeping things before we jump into questions. This is Bulb Digital's office hours. We do this once a month, the first Wednesday of every month, and we love to just kind of open our doors to anyone that has questions and dig in and help people try to get unstuck with whatever they're facing in Office 365. So if you have any questions specific to any of the Office 365 tools, or even more strategic questions like how do I approach onboarding at more organization better and that kind of stuff. We love all types of questions. Feel free to drop them in chat. And then like Mike or Matt said in chat, if you want to come off mute, we can do that. Just raise your hand and then we can talk back and forth a little bit easier than in just text chat. So, trying to think if there's anything else. Let's see. We're streaming to both YouTube and Teams. So for those of you in Teams, obviously the raise hand is just for you. If you're on YouTube, you're welcome to join us on the Teams call. Just let us know and we'll send you a link. So with that, let's jump into questions.
All right, so we got our first question here. It's from Thomas, and he is asking if there's a way to patch a multi-select choice column in a SharePoint list. So I'm assuming we mean update the values in that column, right?
Yep.
For a given record.
I'm creating an example right now.
Yeah, so that would probably entail basically building a little bit of JSON, right? A snippet of sorts from the data that the user selects in the app, and then posting that as the value. If I had to take a pseudo guess at it.
Yeah, I am creating an example right now because it can be very confusing, so I can understand. I think this is the one I was doing. I don't know whether or not, Mitch, you're sharing my screen, but you can feel free to if you want. So I am just getting some example stuff going here. So I think I have an item in here already. I do. So and hopefully nobody can hear any of the rain because it's raining off and on pretty hard right now here in the office. So what's that? They can hear it a little bit? Yeah. So if you hear anything, that is what's going on in the background. We've had off an hour on rain showers, and right actually before we went live, it was quite heavy.
Thomas says it's good on his end, so
Yeah, which is good.
Someone just said, "Oh, I can't hear." You can hear us though, right? It's not that you can't hear us at all, you just can't
Yeah,
hear.
okay,
Gotcha.
okay, good.
Perfect.
You freaked Mitch out. Which, Thomas, if you want to come off mute, I think we either would have already let you or we can let you if you want. But basically, I'm just going to try to pull down what's out there. The key to in general, the key to solving the problem is to get the right format for the object that you're updating, which is not necessarily super easy because multi-value columns are, if you really want to get into the super technical details, in the database, they're stored as a string, as just a raw value, but the value has a certain format, much like a person field or a multi-select person field. Like all of those things are, string fields, but they hold JSON, they hold XML or something that is in the format that SharePoint needs in order to know what the heck you're storing.
And just for clarification's sake, that format, we're talking about a choice field, right? So somebody's got like option 1, option 2. Does that piece of JSON, that string, does it store the value, the string value?
Yeah,
I mean,
yep.
Or does it store like an ID of the choice?
I'm pretty sure it's the value because there is no ID for choice fields in particular, which makes them both nice and confusing.
Sure.
But here, I'm going to just add a gallery quick, vertical gallery, point it at my list. Okay, so I've got two things, and I'm going to be able to select one, which I'm going to click now to select one. And at that point, I should be able to go to button and say, let me go here. Sorry, my tree view. Gallery 1.selected. So if I go to selected, I'm going to see, let me bring this down. Maybe I don't have anything. Oh, no, I do. Okay. So it has a record selected, and you can kind of look a little bit at what's going on, what's inside of this, which in my case, I added a field I should have added a field called multi-value something or other. So in here, I added one multi-choice. This is a new field. List name. My naming is terrible. I apologize. My name is list. So I connected to the wrong one. That's why I'm not seeing the field. So let me look at this quick. So I'll go back here, add data, SharePoint. And in here, I'll grab this again. It's really coming down right now. So I'll do list. This is my beautiful naming convention here. So I'm just going to go in here and I'll remove my gallery and add it back. So gallery, vertical. This time I'll choose list. Okay, so this is going to be gallery 2. And so now one thing that I like to do is when doing this, I can select this or come over here for the item, and then I can see what's in it down below. And so if I scroll down, I should see my multi-value column somewhere in here. Yep, multi-choice. That's a table. If you can see what this is, that tells me that the thing that it's looking for here is a table. And so if I actually did it should be multi-choice. Again, my naming is getting to me. So if I go in here and now I can double click this, and it should show up down here eventually. I don't know why it's taking so long. What the table actually looks like. Come on. Okay, here we go. And it didn't find any data. The reason it didn't find any data is because, as you can see here, I only have one record and it doesn't have anything in multi-choice. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new one quick. Put a date in, description, and in my multi-choice, I'm going to pick 2 choices, and I'm going to save it. So now if I come into Power Apps, I can go back to my data sources and right-click and refresh this. And then I'm going to select this one, because I want this one to be the one that's selected. Come back into the button, double-click on multi-choice, and now you can see I have a table with 2 values. And so what this tells me is that if I want to actually update this, what I need to do, so let's say, and Thomas, you're going to correct me if I'm not doing exactly what you're looking for, but this is going to be a patch, and the first thing of a patch is the source. So in this case, I want to update list. And then I want the record that I want to actually, I think, yeah. So list source is going to be gallery 2.selected, and then the update is going to be, something else, whatever I want. In this case, I should be able to make it a record like this. What did I call it? Multi-choice. Table. And then I believe I can just give it 1. Like that. And then another parenthesis maybe. But it doesn't like it because I'm probably doing table wrong. Let me see. What's it saying to me? Non-record value is in the context. Table functions some valid arguments. Yeah, so my problems are that I need to make this into, because I'm trying to do it a little bit contrived. I think, if I remember right, we need to do, what is it? I think I got to create, give me just a minute here. I want to look at the function for table, but the goal here is to create a function, a new table with what you want, and that should update it. And Thomas, if you can confirm that that's roughly what you're trying to do, that would be super helpful. Because if I'm off, we won't spend any time on this, and you can just tell me give me a little bit more detail, and we can kind of look into that specifically. Oh, so I'm supposed to give it. Yeah, so my problem is I'm not giving it a record, but I think I am, because that's what this is. So that should give me. I guess I don't know what the column name is. That's probably what I'm missing. Oh no. Let me look over here. So selected. Let's do this. So let's grab this quick. Check it out. Comment this out quick.
He just responded, said, yes, ideally I would like to patch from a collection.
Value.
Only because I had difficulties patching all the records in the gallery, but the syntax is my main goal.
Cool. So at least we're heading down the right path. So it's got a thing called value, but this is supposed to be like this, like that. Yeah, so in theory, this should just do it. So in theory, based on this ridiculous example I have, I should be able to simply go and select any one of these. So if I go Alt and select this, and I click this button, in theory, it should have just updated the choice. So I'm gonna go here, and there, choice 1. Except for I spelled it wrong, I think. No? Oh, I didn't have the space. So it's a new value. Notice how it puts in a new value here. But I didn't have a space. So it's really supposed to be, to get it to really work with my example, it would need like this. And Thomas, would it be helpful if I pasted this code right into chat so you had it? Cool. I will do that. Does that answer your question, Thomas? Or can we move on, or did you have something else on that syntax, or did you want to talk about, you're saying you wanted to patch from the collection, but you had difficulties patching all the records? And if anybody else has something they want to ask, feel free to put it in chat again and or raise your hand. And we'll get to it after we're done with Thomas.
Thomas, I did allow your mic just in case you wanted to jump on, so up to you.
Yeah, so I don't want to take your whole day here, but that would be the only other question I would ask is if you didn't manually enter the choice value, if you were pulling it from either the gallery or from a collection or some other spot.
Yeah, could you explain that to me? Like, so, are you...
So, like, let's say that I am, let's say that I'm trying to populate a SharePoint list.
Yep.
From, let's just say I've got like 60 odd records coming from an Excel file.
Got it.
And let's say that one of those fields is destined for the multiple choice field in the SharePoint list.
Have you ever done a for all?
I've done a for all, and I think it should have worked, but I didn't get the syntax right the way that you were doing it.
Got it.
So assuming.
Yeah, so let me do a couple other things. Table. I don't think this will work because I don't have an ID to match the two, but I think it'll maybe give you
While Matt's doing that, we have like 15 people total, somewhere around there. Drop any questions you have in chat.
So I'm going to do a for all. Let's do set. Let's do. There we go. So I'm just making a table of values that we can use to test out what we're talking about here. So that should give me a context, and then I should be able to do test table. So we're saying for everything in test table, and I'm going to do, I don't know if you're aware of it, but as, I'm going to just call it TT. So this allows me to basically reference the record. I think it's actually with capital A maybe. Yeah. This instead of using this record, it allows me to use TT. It's the best way to, and if you have multiple things, they're going to be filtered. It's the best way to manage that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to say, okay, cool. I'm going to get the item that I need to update. Instead of using gallery selected, I would do gallery. I would probably do like filter. All items, I think is what it's, yeah. All items by, I don't know, like the ID, which I don't have an ID, so I can't do it that way. But I would filter this and get me just one of these. So probably do first or something. Like this isn't ideal. I'm just kind of making it up here. But like first here, and let's do. So theoretically, this would give you one record. And then in here, instead of doing table value choice 1, I would put in tt dot, value, right? So in this case, what I'm doing at this point is I'm saying, hey, for all of the things I got in my source table, go patch. So look up find me an item, right? And then patch it with the value that I got from my for all. Now, in theory, like you'd have to maybe generate this, which if you don't know how to do some of those things, I don't know if you've ever done this either, but you could do, so let's say I want to do this, but I want to do an if statement to say, hey, maybe I didn't find it in SharePoint and I need to create it. You can do things like with SP item, and then use your filter first in this. So that basically gives you a named variable within the context of this particular section of code that you can use down below. So instead of using this first thing, I would do SP item, and then where am I at? I think I gotta have one more. Yeah, my formatting is bad. Sorry. Format text. There. So, and I'll expand this so it's a little easier to see. But basically, this for all will now use this with to say, hey, with this SP item first, and now I could do like a if statement ahead of this to say, hey, if I don't find one, create one. If I do find one, patch this. Is this helpful, Thomas? Does this answer your question more completely? Okay, do you want this syntax? I can give you what I have here. Okay, cool. I'm going to remove formatting so it'll just be in 2 lines so we aren't killing ourselves. And let me grab this and I'll paste it. What's the next one, Mike?
We do have another question. Emily asked, as far as documentation for apps, do we follow or have a template or have any recommendations? I think, Emily, I have a question for you about what you mean in terms of documentation. You could mean user docs, so like help docs for the apps, or you might mean documentation for, the next developers that come along and work on the app. Can you clarify that a little bit?
And Mitch, can she come off mute if she wants to?
Yeah, I just did that.
For next developers. So in terms of that type of documentation, I think a lot of it depends on the organization that you're building the apps for and what their requirements are. In a lot of ways, the no-code, low-code world is very new, and so there's not a lot out there in terms of templates or anything like that. I will tell you, for the apps that I have built, I build crazy comments to explain things as much as I can throughout the code that I do write. And obviously, there's not much code because it's no code or low code. But in the scenarios where you find yourself, like maybe in the past you would have been in like an application on start, or if you're in the on visible of a screen and you're loading up a bunch of data context, for example, it helps to put copious comments in there to explain what is going on. And then the other place where it can be helpful to include comments is if you have a complex condition statement or something like that, where you're doing something like kind of what Matt was just doing with a for all, and if I found a record, patch it. If I didn't find it, create a new one. Having comments in there that are human readable can be very helpful. I don't know, Matt, do you have any other?
Yeah, I have a couple suggestions. Number one, like exactly what Mike was saying about trying to put in comments. Some things that people may not realize is you can add a new note in Power Automate, as an example. Like, a lot of these tools have ways built into it to document. I will, for example, if I do a trigger parameter or trigger condition, thank you. I will 100% add a note with probably the entire trigger condition thing, whatever it is, plus some description about hey, this is what I'm trying to do. This is why we did this way, right? Yep. The same thing with all of the actions, rename the actions. add notes, right? If it's something you're trying to document and explain, do all of that 100%. Same thing goes for Power Apps, like in Power Apps, which I don't know whether or not are you sharing my screen still, Mitch? Okay. Like in Power Apps, like in what I was just doing, I would be like right up the top, add a comment, right? Like what, this is what this is trying to do. 100%, I would do that. The other big things are creating solutions instead of individual apps. Solutions help self-document because it allows you to know everything that is about this app, right? I can go to a solution and look at that solution, and if there's two flows and an app and maybe a management app that are all together, I can visually be like, oh, I got it. Like I get what this app contains. If you don't have that, if you're not using that, having or even if you do, having an architecture diagram using, quite frankly, Visio sucks in a lot of ways. We've been using Whimsical or something else for this because it's way easier to do. But using a tool to whiteboard out like this is the components and this is how they fit together is huge. Because, and to be clear, that's more important to me than all the details of everything that's going on in the code, because you should be handing it off to a developer that can sort that out, can figure that out, can kind of understand what's going on, generally speaking. The third thing is not necessarily documentation for your app, but we would encourage you to create standards for how you develop low-code apps. Do you use the OnStart? Right. No, we do not. There should never be any code in OnStart, right? Or we use a theming this way, right? And this is how our theme works. We use patch for everything. We do, you can't do everything, but some basic things can be very helpful in just giving a lay of the land for somebody who's truly, if you're talking about a brand new developer, never done anything in your organization for this, having some standards, number one, can help people be consistent, but then also can give people a baseline to go look at.
Well, it's if in terms of like somebody picking something up to fix a bug down the road.
Correct.
If your organization always does a particular thing a certain way, they're going to be quicker to find
what the issue is,
what the issue is, and then quicker to fix it.
So the one other thing I was going to mention, it's the same kind of thing as Power Automate, but I'm going to mention it. Like I mentioned in Power Automate, but there are a lot of places within the Power Platform where you can add comments and details, and I would encourage you to do so. So for example, if I am in Dataverse on a table and I'm adding a table or a field, all of those things have descriptions. All of those things have, use them. You don't have to be crazy, but at least put something in there that'll tell someone what it is that you're talking about, that'll help them understand how this all works.
Yep, and I think it obviously, for things like that, documenting individual columns or tables, it obviously makes the most sense to document the ones that are the most
complicated,
most
confusing, most unique to your marketplace,
most critical to the application.
Yep,
right?
100%. Yep. Yeah, because that's the other thing is, honestly, one of the points of low code is to have low code and low documentation. Like everybody's trying to do self-documenting stuff, right? So you don't, I don't know that I would go through every field. An address is an address. You probably don't need to put a comment on that, right? Does that help, Emily? Cool. Excellent. What else we got? Anybody have any other questions?
Yeah, feel free to post in chat or raise your hand.
It's really hard to hear ourselves right now. Like when you just said that, I could not hear it with all the sound in the.
Mike doesn't speak up. He's camera
Well,
shy, you guys. Can everyone give Mike some claps in chat?
Yeah, give him some love. He needs some love to be loud and not
He's
just.
shy.
I turn on my microphone voice.
Yeah, you do for
my
sure.
Recording voice.
Well, it usually isn't a problem for me, but the sound, the rain is just like I cannot hear you.
All right, let's do a thought exercise to maybe prompt some questions. Let's pretend you wake up a year from now and everything that you want to do at your organization is done. What would that be, and what is your challenge facing you right now that's preventing you from getting that done?
Okay, say that again.
What? So like, I'll skip the beginning.
In a year, yep, I
Wake
got
up in
that.
a year. What is done that you want to get done, and what is preventing you now from being able to achieve that?
Specific to, like, is this for people or for us?
This is for our audience.
Oh, our audience. Okay. We got a question from YouTube in the meantime while you guys are thinking about that. What are some top Power Platform features coming out soon that you're looking forward to? That's a good question. I'm not going to talk about specific ones. Microsoft actually is really annoying in how they manage them. They do them in waves, so you get a bunch of new features every, I don't know, I think it's 3 months or 6 months or something like that in a new wave. When they come out, they kind of you do have some prior notice, but it's kind of drop a bunch all on you. So I don't know that I'm going to talk about specific ones that I know that are coming out like in the next wave, but I know that they're working on some significant updates to how the on start is working, and I cannot wait to have something like, presumably it's going to be better. They have given scant details about what it's really going to be, but from everything I can understand, I think it will be better. Yep. And I can't wait for that for sure.
One of the ones that I'm it's not. Again, it's not specific. It's kind of more generic. But if you're working in model-driven apps at all, and you may have noticed there's certain things that you still have to use the classic interface for, and it's a slow progression of moving those things forward. But it's very frustrating.
The last wave, they made huge improvements. I'm looking forward to them making those same improvements for the next 3 waves, because maybe by then they'll have most of it out. But because if you're not familiar to it with model-driven apps, you used to have a classic designer experience, which was horrific. I say classic, but it's actually modern classic. It's like not the Dynamics old school on-premise Dynamics look and feel. It was at least Power Apps feel, but it was terrible because you had sitemap, and like you had all this weird navigation stuff that was terrible.
Customization.
Yeah, it was terrible.
Yeah.
But yeah, 100%. I'm looking for, I don't know when that's gonna. I think it'll be a long time. Much like SharePoint, I think it'll be a long time before it's all gone. But I would expect maybe in the next 2 waves.
So if I was going to vote for the
way better.
The next specific thing within that realm that I want updated, it's the business rule designer.
Yeah.
Right? It's like.
If it was me, I would be the roll-up designer.
Yep.
Can one of you
fields.
describe the changes coming to Power Apps that, as far as you understand, the OnStart related stuff?
Yeah, I can try to do a little bit of it. I don't know everybody in the audience how much you are in real as hardcore developers, but really what's going on is they are taking a model that was this very, OnStart, we do all this caching and do all this work, and saying, we're going to take that all away and take a model that is more closely related to React and Vue and like a bunch of these JavaScript front-end frameworks where they say, we're going to have an engine that figures out whether or not something got updated, and I'm just going to update it for you. And so instead of having, like when you would traditionally have an OnStart, which sets up, let's say, a list of, maybe all over your app, it's critical to have a list of users, as an example. And it may take a little while to start and get that. Instead of OnStart refreshing that and then maybe having a button to refresh it or refreshing it on a regular basis or something like that, you would just set that variable to a chunk of code that goes and gets the data. And then in theory, that's it. It's just always there. Like it always goes out and gets the data. It always is refreshed. It's always it's just always there, which is very similar to what, like I said, React, Vue, a lot of these other frameworks do something very similar. But their theory is that that's going to resolve 90% of the scenarios that people want to use OnStart. Is that going to be everything? I don't know. Will they be able to give us more flexibility in how you can deal with things so that you don't end up having to deal with, one of the challenges we have today is if I want to do anything, like actually do anything, it needs to be in an action. So on a click of a button or on a what?
On select. Yeah.
Do we now have an option to create a variable that does some stuff and it just updates every once in a while? Like, I don't know.
Well, I think that's the key, right? Is the timing of that update. and if you have any control over it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. Because I don't think they're going to provide us functions like what I think a lot of people had wanted, like people who said, "Oh, on start, blah blah blah. I want my own functions or my own chunk of code to do whatever I want to do." I don't think they're going to give us that, but I do think what they're going to give us is going to transform the way that we're doing these things a little bit and make them better. Quite frankly.
I'd be interested to know if they provided an option to connect that to something you could create within your solution. Within your solution, could you have a mechanism that would let you control how that was updated, how often it was updated, right?
So the other things that I know Microsoft is working on, again, I don't have specifics about what they're looking to do, is ALM improvements and improvements around the developer experience. I think Microsoft has a huge problem with, they keep talking about these tools as citizen development tools, which they are. But when you want to do citizen development at the level that they're trying to provide in this solution, you need to have governance. You need to have, ALM. You need to have, some sort of framework. But what they haven't done is the moment you want to do that, you have to be a hardcore dev. Like, if you really want to implement ALM with test prod, all that stuff, you have to be way closer to a hardcore dev than you are to a citizen developer. And I'm really hoping and looking forward to them improving that experience to bring that to the masses, so that everyone has this experience of being able to manage that in a way that's effective, but doesn't require you to, know a bunch of PowerShell and write your own templates for in either GitHub or Git Actions or in pipelines and DevOps to go make it happen, right? Like, that's not going to work for 80 to 90% of the people that are using these tools and want to use them at an enterprise scale, right? Yeah. And I don't think I think that there are ways that you can make that work. You can implement something that is somewhere in the middle, right? Where I, as a citizen developer, still can do things that are more proper from a development perspective without having to be a developer. I don't know. Anything else you can think of, Mike? I can't think of anything specific right offhand. I know that they're probably going to be announcing the details of the next wave here in the next month or two, if I remember right.
Well, there's that conference that's coming up.
Yeah,
right?
A lot of it'll be,
There's
correct, 100%.
A bunch of stuff dropped at that.
Yep, the Power Platform Conference down in Florida,
Yep.
like that. A lot of things are probably going to drop right around that same time. That's 100% right.
Yep.
Thanks for the question, Rachel, on YouTube. Feel free, again, if you have any questions and you're watching, you need help getting unstuck with anything Office 365, feel free to drop them in chat.
So your thought exercise was interesting, Mitch, which is to say, hey, imagine you got through your apps, for Emily or for Thomas, whatever, you worked on your app that you're working on today, and you've gotten through it, in 6 months or a year from now. What's the next thing? What's the next thing that is going to be driving you to do or to create or to, take to the next level, right? Is it going to be moving from, in your organization, moving from doing, one-off development into, bringing it to the broad organizations so they can implement these tools?
Maybe, taking a look at some of the apps that your organization has had for the last 10 years.
And revamping them
asking
in that
the
light.
question, can we build this in no-code, low-code?
Yeah. Yep.
Can we move it to the cloud, right?
Yeah.
Thomas says adding robotic capabilities to Power Apps.
So when you say robotics, do you mean
Machines or
no? Yeah.
AI?
Do you mean the acronym is escaping
Robotic
me.
process.
Yeah.
Whatever.
RPA.
RPA.
Yeah. RPA. So that's what you meant,
RPA.
Thomas. Yeah. Yeah. Like, so from your perspective, what's the benefit of RPA? Do you guys have a bunch of, non-cloud or, interfaces that aren't super have advanced API integrations that you want to be able to integrate, or is there something else you're thinking of for RPA? And while you're responding, Rachel asked, do you prefer one screen or multiple screen Power Apps? Or is it dependent on another factor, such as the number size of data sources loading each screen?
I love this question.
It's a great question.
So the first thing I'll mention is we do have And it doesn't touch on this specifically, maybe slightly. We have a couple of YouTube videos out there where I spent some time with Josh, who is our UX designer, where we kind of walked through a Canvas app that I built. And he has some really good pointers in there. And one of the things that I think is relevant to this question is the concept of, especially in Canvas apps, taking the user through the experience or guiding them through the process of accomplishing whatever task that they're doing. And oftentimes that makes sense to take them through a set of screens. So for example, if you have, let's say it's a mobile form factor and you're trying to capture a lot of data, the last thing you want to do is cram all of those fields on one screen and have the user scroll to fill in all of those fields. Have them fill out a few key grouped pieces of information and then next. Take them to the next screen. Do the same thing, next. And when they're done, they can click submit or touch submit or whatever they might do. So that would be a specific reason, like mobile and a lot of data and guiding the user to the point that you want to take them would be a strong reasons for multiple screens.
Yeah. So, Mitch, were you going to
Sorry,
say that?
I'm
Go
off
ahead.
screen, but I want to participate too.
Go.
What comes to my mind is the engineering type minds think, what is all the information related to this thing that I can display here so that I have everything in front of me and I can manipulate it exactly how I want. But the user experience side of things says that takes a ton of mental load to take in all that information and find the thing that you want. So choose a purpose for a screen and identify the role that the person is playing in that, and make sure that the things that they're typically going to do function really easily and are one click away. And if you need to add an extra depth to it, make that one step deeper. So just eliminating basically how much can you get rid of at the front of everything, and then what can be one step behind, and making it easy to navigate between all those things is kind of the key.
And I would just say, the only thing I would say is what you said is another factor. Yes, but that other factor is a bajillion factors. So as an example, I would design a screen for viewing very different than editing. I would design a screen that is used every day. I'm data entering 1,000 of these things a day versus something I used twice a month, right? And as an example, the twice a month thing, I might have a way higher degree of focus on making sure that it's clear what I'm asking them to do, because they might not remember. If I only do this twice a month, maybe I don't remember this, or maybe I don't remember some weird scenario that occurs, right? There are lots of different reasons to choose one choice over the other. Cost is another factor. You have multiple pages, it costs more most times to design those things. It takes mental energy, design energy to choose those things. It takes more from a maintenance and support perspective. There are so many reasons to choose one over the other. I don't think there is just one or the other. I do think if your default is put all the fields for a record on one screen and that's the default, I think that's probably bad, right? You should be thinking about, much like Mike said, grouping things. If you let's say I have a form that requires user information and then service information, I would make those two separate screens, 100%, no question, or at least two sections on one screen. Because another question is, are people mostly accessing this on their phone or tablet, or are they mostly accessing this on a big screen desktop, right? In a desktop, I might have a lot of real estate that I can maybe put those things on here, and it maybe makes sense. So I think there's lots of different things.
Well, and then there's probably a few different paradigms as well. If you think about customized list forms in SharePoint, for example, right? It's a single form. Even if, generally speaking, if you're starting from a basic level, it's a single form and it has different modes.
Correct.
Right. So you have one screen in different modes. But even in that scenario, if you have a lot of data that you're capturing, right, you can have multiple screens. But so there's that baseline, start here, it's simple, easy to build, right, quick. But if your application or your process has any level of complexity or a lot of data that can be confusing to throw at the user in one shot, you're going to want to separate those things.
Yeah. Back to the RPA question. So Thomas responded, so he said when he thought about what happens over the next in a year after he's done doing what he's doing, what's the next thing to look at? Adding RPA capabilities. And his reasoning, because I asked him, hey, what's the reasoning? Connecting to systems that don't ordinarily communicate. And that's a great, perfect reason to use RPA. The one thing, so I would just tell you, the other thing you could consider would be to create custom connectors. So if you're connecting to something that does have a web service, so they do support a web service, they just don't have a connector built into Power Automate or Power Apps, you can build custom connectors that will allow you to connect to a third-party web service. That may be another way to connect. Not saying RPA is bad. RPA is way simpler. RPA is there's lots of reasons that is a great solution. But I would just mention it. You could also connect using a custom connector.
If you did a custom connector and you built the service yourself and it was on-prem, you could do it through a gateway, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yep. Cool. Anybody else thought about what they're looking to, or what they would be doing in a year? I like this thought exercise, Mitch. For the custom connector, so I don't know where the final detail is. At one point in time, every tenant could have one, or environment, I think, could have one custom connector. But custom connectors are licensed based on the premium Power, if you're doing Power Apps or Power Automate, a premium license. So if you have a premium license of Power Apps or Power Automate,
it's considered
you can use a
connector.
You can create a connector which is then considered a premium connector. But again, that's only required for the people who are connecting to that connector. So in a Power Automate scenario, if it's an automated flow that's being triggered by SharePoint or something else, the only license is the one that creates it. If you're talking about Power Apps, everyone who's using the Power App would need to be licensed at the higher level.
Right. So in the Power Automate scenario, we've often seen where we've created an automation account.
Yep.
Right. It's a cloud account,
and it's got the license.
It has the license, and it's set up to run all of the flows that do those connections.
Rachel, thanks again for loving on the content.
Looks like she's writing up a question.
Yes.
Looks like we have about 10 minutes left. So if you want to get another question in before we go, it'd be great to drop that in chat now.
Mike, can I get the power that you had?
Bet.
Thank you. I'm not in trouble, but
Emily, you do have ability to unmute if you prefer that, to save you some typing. It's up to you. Oh, nice. It's about the course. She won a course. We did a giveaway recently, and she got our Intro to Power Apps course. So I was curious on where she was at with that. So awesome. Excited for you.
Yeah, we're excited to hear the feedback, get some feedback on the course.
Our elevator music.
Ooh, that's a good question. Mitch, can they hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Thomas asked a good question. Asking if we've dealt with putting social security numbers or similar data, so personal identification information, in SharePoint Online, in a SharePoint Online list. That is a good question. So I think there's a few different options there, right? Data classification and all kinds of stuff. How deep do we want to go?
I don't know that we have to go too deep. It's not so much about social security numbers and those things. The reality is when you have that data, your organization has likely rules and policies that need to be adhered to with those pieces of data.
And those rules and policies need to make their way to the cloud environment. If you're going to store that data there.
Well, what I was getting at is by default, SharePoint supports all of them. Like it can store that no problem, right? But that doesn't mean that you like. And what I mean by that is as a data center, all the data is encrypted at rest. All of the employees are vetted. All of the they do all the things that they're supposed to do, right?
Yep. Yeah, but in SharePoint, I can share with somebody who's outside my organization.
Correct.
Right?
But my point is that just because Office 365 supports storing that data does not mean that the way that you are using Office 365 is in compliance with your organization's policies and practices around storing PII data or whatever your organization would classify it. There's different ways, different organizations in different places will have different things. PII is a lot of the times the predominant thing in the US, or PHI. But there's nothing technically wrong with storing it in SharePoint as a platform from a Microsoft perspective. But as you said, how is that the site or the list configured, right?
Yep.
So for example, most let's take the same information but in Europe. Europe has rules about you can't transmit that data outside of the country, right? So you probably should have conditional access policies to not allow you to access SharePoint sites outside of the European Union, which you can do in the tenant, but that doesn't mean it's set up.
We've seen access policies that stop you from accessing SharePoint Online if you don't have a company-owned machine.
Correct.
For example, right? So
that could be based on site. So again, let's say that your site. Let's take it to one example. One of our customers. One of our customers, when you request a SharePoint site, you can have a bunch of stuff configured on it, right? One of the things you can configure on it is what level of access am I going to give a device that is not managed by the organization that is creating this? For Social Security number, the requirement would be they do not have access. So if you're working with a SharePoint site that doesn't have that turned on, and you put a Social Security number in there, you're in violation of the policy, right?
There's another angle on this, though, and that is data classification.
Correct, right? Which the data classification can be put on list items, it can be put on documents, which is just another way to add those are all what are called conditional access policies. Those are just other ways to assign those same policies, but the bottom line is you need to make sure that there's a policy applied to that data where you're storing it that adheres to your organization's standards. And as long as you're doing that, there's nothing wrong with storing it in SharePoint.
Policies can be applied at the container level, but they can also be applied based on the classification of the
document or the line item. Like it can be, and there's so many ways to do it, right?
Yep.
And it's possible your organization could say, yeah, we just don't do that, period, right? Like if that's the policy, we don't put it in the cloud. That's the policy.
It does take effort to set that up for sure, right? Because not only do you have to have somebody that can configure it and knows their way around, right? From a SharePoint admin standpoint, but you as an organization have to come to an understanding of what that is if you don't already have that.
Yeah, so I'll give an example of something that you just can't do in SharePoint that if your organization requires it. Some organizations require that when I'm looking at a record that the PII data is not immediately shown, you have to select it. And the goal of that is that I don't have somebody over my shoulder looking at my computer because I'm showing them something, and they shouldn't see the PII information, but I click into an item and I immediately get PII information. Their rule is you should have a button that says show this stuff. Much like your password, right? Like you don't want to go to your account information and I'll randomly show somebody your password, right? Like that's not what you want. That if that's their rule, by default, that's not how it works. Now you could do it. You could create a custom form, SharePoint form, and that form can have a button that says, show me this other, you can do it, but it's on you to make it work how it needs to work for that policy that your organization has set up.
Yep, that's a good explanation. One other thing that, since you didn't mention it, is one of the other policies that we've seen is that you can set at a container level or data classification level is whether or not you allow the user to download a document, for example.
So that's actually an interesting one because it's not actually by user. You cannot stop a user from downloading it if they have access to it. But what we do set is whether or not the device. So what you set is if you're on a device that's not managed by the organization, you can have it no access.
But you can also set it at the container level, right?
Correct.
Straight up say on the SharePoint site collection, you can't download
Can't do.
stuff.
Correct. Yep.
Good question. You're welcome.
I think we're just about out of time, Mitch.
Final call. Give some more elevator music. All right. We'll call it with that. Again, thank you so much for joining. I posted a link to our newsletter if you want to keep up to date with everything that we've got going on. Get Office 365 tips in your inbox. Feel free to scroll up and subscribe there. Otherwise, we will see you a month from now for office hours. So you can go to bulb.digital/office-hours and sign up for the next one. And we're looking forward to it. So thanks again for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Cool.
Thanks,
Bye, everybody.
Mm.